Good evening. I would like to call to order the November 7th, 2022 work session of the York County School Board. November is a busy month as many students are finishing up projects, meeting assignment deadlines, and making time to participate in various holiday activities and getting ready for the upcoming Thanksgiving break in just a few weeks. Before we begin tonight, I wanted to thank Dr. Shandor and his team for sending out some information to our families in the digest last week regarding the NAEP scores. There was a lot in the news about it, and it was a lot of, I guess, negative connotation with it. And I really appreciate your team clarifying that it was a national test. 50 of our students took that test. And if families really want to see a good reflective score of how our kids are doing, that you guys already presented that SOL data. But I just want to say thank you for sending out that digest to families just to give some clarification to them on what that test is. I don't know if any other board members want to add something to that, but I just thought it was important for us to bring that up tonight.
I think it's just important to emphasize that they've picked the same school over the last several years to give the test to the federal government that does that, and that we only had 40 to 50 kids take the test. That's not a good representative sample, of 12,000 kids in our school division. But it was just in the middle school level too as well. It was not in the elementary or high school level. It was just middle school. So just wanted to make sure that was pointed out.
Thank you again. Just thought it was important to make sure we brought that up tonight. We're going to move on to our presentations. We have a few topics this evening, and the first one is our capital projects report. Dr. Shandor.
Yes, thank you. Madam Chair, board members, good evening. We have 6 presentations for you this evening. We're going to start off with our capital projects report from Dr. Carroll, and then he's going to move into the draft 6-year facility master plan. I'll turn it over to Dr. Carroll.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. Madam Chair, members of the board. So here is your capital projects report, and Mr. Shearhart wasn't available to be here tonight, so you'll hear it from me. Just a few projects here that we'll talk about. First of all, Seaford Elementary, is that renovation and addition continues. And right now we're working towards getting dried in. That's when you're a little protected from the elements and you can start to work towards drywalling inside of the building. And their goal is to get there by January 1. And they're on pace at this time. And you can see the status here. They've completed the brick installation around the addition. The stage addition, they've finished the roof installation over the stage, and they're wrapping up the metal roof decking installation over the new classrooms, and I'll show you pictures of that in a little bit. So here you see the October 7th picture of the stage addition at the end of the gym, and then here we are November 5th, and you can see the brick is in place and the roof is complete up there, so except for the last cover. So that's looking good. Also on the inside, if you were to go into the gymnasium, you'll see a bunch of plywood, a structure that's protecting the building from construction activity on the inside. So on the right, you see that plywood structure. You see the flooring right where the ladder is, and on the left side, you would step up onto the stage, and then you can see the metal framing for some architectural flair, I guess you'd say, and so that continues to be worked on. And here now you see the picture that you saw on October 7th, where we have the addition has some of the roof joists up, and this picture was taken by Mr. Dave Kilburn on our team with his drone. And here we are on November 5th. You can see the roof decking is almost complete there. And then inside under that roof decking, this is what it looks like. The metal roof decking has been installed, and they are in the process of installing the rest of the roof. So we'll move on to York High. So that was a repair and coating. And where we are with the project status is they have wrapped up all the punch list items, finished the painting and the existing rooftop HVAC units. We did go ahead and order metal roofing for the auditorium, and so that is being added to the project, and will take them up to January 6th to complete. And this should look familiar with the white coating over the majority of the roof, except for the annex there that's on the left and now in the foreground. The annex would be dealt with, that's on the current CIP, and so that would be dealt with it when or if we get to that project. And then Bruton High School, we've got some great pictures here. You know that we were putting in an AstroTurf field there, and that has now been completed. It passed final inspection last Thursday. And so just to remind you, this is what it looked like on October 7th, where we were laying stone and finishing the grading for it. And here it is, November 3rd. Beautiful picture of the color. It really looks like, one of those renditions the architects build and just, place it in a picture and from a different angle. There you go. So that is the pit looking very good. It is ready for competition now. And that completes my report. I welcome any questions you may have.
Questions, comments?
Now that the pit, as well as Bailey, have set the standard for synthetic turf fields in the county, I have heard, and I had mentioned to Dr. Shandor, there's pressure in the mid-county and lower county for field use and playable hours on fields. I have heard from parents and students alike about a desire for synthetic turf on our end of the county. I had mentioned Dr. Shandor, what I'd like to suggest is perhaps an assessment or a cost estimate, particularly as we come off of the Bruton field replacement. Obviously, it wouldn't be as rigorous. I know we had to replace drainage there and so forth, but it's not part of the CIP, so we discussed a little bit how do we introduce perhaps new requirements, reprioritize requirements. But I'd like to do an assessment and even a cost estimate what it might be able to do at Tabb High School. And obviously that would include lights, and it's to assist for all the other sports right now. Soccer and field hockey practice, and we're playing on the same field. I took a walk last spring and again early this fall. As you guys can imagine, it's not necessarily a level playing surface, even perhaps a safe playing surface. It's awfully worn due to practice and playing games at the same time. So what we've done is we're now using Bailey Field, perhaps overusing Bailey Field. And I heard from a couple of parents whose student athletes are coming out of school early in the afternoon and sometimes late morning to participate in district and regional playoff games as we've stacked up, our scheduled Bailey on Thursdays and Fridays in particular. That schedule's stacked up, and they're coming out of school and missing class time because again of the overuse of Bailey. So, anyways, let's take a serious look at it, do an assessment to include some costing or pricing, and kind of see where we fall out.
Well, certainly, we can look at that. If we were to go down that road, it certainly would take the load off of Bailey, which would be less use of that field, which would lengthen the life of it. And it would improve scheduling, because I know just a few weeks ago we had field hockey stacked all over each other, and that would improve scheduling for kids too. We can certainly get a cost. It will be, even though it wouldn't have the drainage costs that the pit had, you're still looking at a large number, and so we can certainly get that price and then look at that against our other CIP. But we would just have to either get the funding from the county or some other source and work that into the program. When we do the renovation at Tabb would probably be the best time to do it.
It'll be a convenient time, and I think our viewers appreciate playable for not only children and students and adults, but also across the entire county with regard to need. And it would help us out down on that end of the county for sure.
Well, I think with the playoffs too, with the Bruton field being available now, I mean, it's still in the upper end of the county, but I think that's certainly going to help with the scheduling. We didn't have that option before, now we have that.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
I think we have to remember too that we don't just have our school teams using these fields, we also have community use.
Roger.
And there's.
And we're hoping that for the pit that we have more community use of it.
Yeah, those playable hours will go up dramatically on a synthetic turf field with lighting for sure. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Obviously, I'm excited about Seaford. Every time I drive by it, there's just something that's different, something that's changing. So it's great. I can't wait to see all that happens. And I know there's a lot going to go on this summer inside the building too, for the teachers in those classrooms there. So I know they're very, very anticipatory about that and just seeing what that's going to look like. So I'm excited. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Dr. Carroll.
We're going to move on. Oh, sorry, that's your job. Go ahead.
Next, we're going to move on to our draft 6-year facility master plan. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you. Dr. Carroll's now going to walk you through our 6-year facilities master plan. There's a lot of, excuse me, a lot of numbers and statistics throughout this, so I've advised him to take his time as he walks you through this. So, Dr. Carroll.
All right, thank you, Dr. Shandor. All right, so this evening I'm pleased to present to you the 6-year facilities master plan. You have a hard copy at your station. There's also a digital copy that is on board docs and will be made available on the website also starting tomorrow. So let's move into it. You'll remember that the Facilities Master Plan, or we call it the FMP, provides background and historical information about our facilities, presents enrollment and school capacity data, addresses facility needs, and recommends projects for the capital improvement program known as the CIP, which will be finalized later this year. And as you all know, we're looking at significantly increased construction costs given the state of the construction market and continuing supply chain issues. Because of that, multiple projects have revised costs from last year, some from revised architectural estimates, and some of the projects in the out years from reasonable increases estimated by our staff, given what we're seeing in the market. And when I mean reasonable, we're making it reasonable. I don't think the numbers are reasonable. It's significant. Okay, so let's start with residential development. There are a number of residential developments that will impact enrollment throughout the division in future years, and the outlook is different than it has been the last few years when I've given this report. I'll remind the board that the county has 3 phases of development: active, pending, and planned. And active are those developments that have already gone through site review and have jumped through all the regulatory loopholes or hoops that they have to, and that they're clear to construct as they wish. Pending are those that are under site review, and sometimes that can take a long time, years in fact. And just because you've passed that site review and you're active doesn't mean that the contractor then does it depending on whatever conditions their company is going through or whatever they forecast as the right time to market. And then planned is just developments that the county's aware of, but no site plan has been submitted. And this is important because this is what we look at to kind of forecast what kind of impact are we going to see. And this year we had a marked change in the relative sizes of each of these lists. Our active list has significantly declined from 469 future units to 136. Now that's a 71% decrease. And that's good for us because it gives us a chance to kind of catch our breath and see what's happening. So in the next year, we don't see or forecast any increased enrollment numbers based on development. There could be other reasons that factor into that, but not from development. So this is a real change. And but we do have the potential for larger growth in the out years because that pending group has grown 15% from 1,220 units to 1,402. And like I said before, contractors will make decisions on whether they're going to move ahead. And we know that you're going to hear from Mr. Bowen later tonight about how the financial condition of the state is in really good shape right now, but everybody is getting ready for a recession, and that will soften the real estate market. The question is about timing. So I'll now present developmental impact based on elementary zone. Okay, so here you have Coventry, Dare, and Grafton Bethel. These projects are listed by zone and the total units expected in the future. As you look at this graph, the certificates of occupancy as of October 1st and the future units. So we focus on the future units of what kind of impact that's going to have on a particular area. If you add both those and the COs as of October 1, that gives you an idea of how far they're into that particular development. So when you look at Commonwealth Green live-abouts, they've completed 3 and they have 6 more in the future. So they've completed a third of their 9 units. And so it gives you that sense. So as we look at these 3, areas. Coventry has 32 units in the future coming. Dare has 10, in Grafton, Bethel, 9. And just because you see a unit doesn't mean that somebody that's going to move in there has school-age children or elementary-age children. The numbers certainly to be lower than that, but it's difficult to gauge what's going to happen there. Right. So then we'll look at Magruder. Now, Magruder is interesting because they've seen some very real growth lately. And it looks like they've absorbed the impact of last year's future units that were up to 54. This year they're down to 7, so that's an 87% reduction. But they're very much close to full. And but when we look at this next year, development shouldn't have much impact with them as with Waller Mills, looking at what's the potential down the road. And here we have Mount Vernon that's got a number of developments going on, but the numbers just aren't very large, only 19 future units, and that's down from 30 last year. And then we look at Seaford and Yorktown, also seeing some slow growth in the last 2 years and slowing from 19 and 23 respectively to 3 and 12. So this just mirrors everything else we're seeing across the county. And then finally, Waller Mill has the most potential for growth, and this is why they and Queens Lake are scheduled for expansions in this year's 6-year plan. Now here I've listed the 4 active developments with the most future units. Last year's report showed the woods of Kings Creek with the most potential for impact with over 200 future units. And this year they're not even on the list. And now we're down to 51. Waller Mill didn't see much growth at all. So this is very illustrative of what we see in the upper county very often, is we'll see these large numbers, we're concerned about it, but it just doesn't yield students. And so this is what makes our planning much more difficult. But we do have to stay vigilant because Waller Mill and Magruder have 692 planned units. And that's concerning. So we have to pay attention to that. Okay, next I'll move to capacities. You've seen this before. When we look at secondary classrooms, they're used differently than elementary, and so our instructional capacities match our building capacities. And when you look at our enrollment as of September 30th, there are no high schools where their enrollment is anywhere close to their instructional capacity, and we are about 900 students division-wide below that number. And middle school is similar, same thing. We don't have any middle schools that are close to their instructional capacity, and we are about 1,000 students below for the division. So we're looking really good as far as middle schools. The only concern there is Queens Lake because of how much development is in the planned category. So we'll need to keep our eye on that, and we also provide for that in the CIP. Excuse me. So next we'll look at enrollment for elementary, and this is the one that usually has our attention. So here you see the model we've used historically for capacity projections, and it assumes a static instructional capacity, which isn't always realistic because that number is subject to change. You could have a reduced instructional capacity if you have more special programs. We have been eliminating computer labs lately because of the one-to-one, and so therefore that's opening up instructional capacity. And then as we add wings. So you look at Seaford right now that has 485, but with an instructional capacity of 518, but that capacity is going to grow significantly when we finish the wing in early fall 24. So this is a straight line projection. So if you see the total in the bottom left of 5705 and you go forward till FY29, you see students of 5904. We're only projecting about 200 students division-wide. And that's because this projection is not tied to real estate development. This is just We looked at the last 3 years, and we omitted FY21 because that was such an outlier. But this model has served us well in the past because sometimes you have things like military reductions in force, you have economic recessions. COVID, of course, messed us all up. But these things tend to happen. We don't tend to have 10, 15 years of straight growth. And so you can see that we're looking pretty good there based on that if we base these numbers. But this is just a different way that we look at it. Of the 4 schools currently over capacity, they also have additional capacity available in the form of portable classrooms, but Magruder is getting very tight. I'll admit that. You'll see that the projection predicts the 199 students, but all growth will be dependent on development and the economy. So now we'll look at the recommended capital improvement projects. We base this on what kind of new construction we need, renovations or additions that we need, HVAC replacement and energy conservation, roof repair and replacement, and other projects. Projects are placed based on the need for capital funds supplied by the county, and the order in which they're placed is dependent on a variety of factors, including instructional capacity that I just discussed, security concerns, age of the structure, building conditions, and cost. So we'll look at elementary first. You'll notice some of the numbers are in green. They denote cash projects or cash contributions to a project. In the past, we've had more smaller projects that could be moved up and backwards to suit funding. This plan starts to coalesce around fewer larger projects that are less fluid in our ability to move and are either necessary due to the age of the roof or the HVAC system or needed to accommodate growth. So we're going to see less fluidity with this as we move through the next 5 to 6 years. We see here the proposed expansion at Dare that has been pushed out 1 year, an expansion wing at Waller Mill that remains in the same year that we had it last year, $200,000 of funds towards an HVAC project at Mount Vernon in cash, and the remaining is the completion of the project funds for the Seaford addition and renovation. As far as middle schools, Queens Lake addition remains on the plan, but we have moved it back 1 year. Completion of the HVAC project at Tab Middle in FY24 and some long-needed locker room renovations at York Middle and Tab Middle. They were moved back a year due to funding reasons. And now we'll move on to high schools. Here we see the finalization of the roof project discussed earlier and the FY23 expected. The Bruton High School roof is deteriorating at a rate faster than was originally anticipated. So you see our work there has been moved up into FY25. And the Tab High School renovation is kicked off in FY24, which will also include a learning commons for them. And all the locker rooms and some restrooms will be addressed as mentioned along with the middle school ones in FY26. The last part of the recommended CIP is other projects and totals. We continue the support of modular classrooms, but we have pulled funds from this area as we can now offset them with reduced computer labs. We have the last of our security vestibules to renovate. I want to be clear that we have a vestibule in every building. The one at Magruder probably could work a little better. And so that is on the plan so that we could renovate that and make it work a little better. Just make it more user-friendly is what we're talking about. It's secure. It's now time to replace our 800 megahertz radios that I think we procured about 8 years ago. We also need to replace some aging PA systems in 7 schools. We've also placed funds in for a preschool center and a new elementary school, although they've been, we'll be monitoring that and we've pushed them out. We also see the totals for which we'll use more cash from a variety of sources, but a general rise in need from the county across the 6-year plan. So you see a total there of total of almost $94 million over the 6 years. Almost $4 million of that being existing cash from the division, leaving just under $90 million for the county to use bonds to satisfy. You also remember that the county gave us $3 million in ARPA funding last year. That paid for for a variety of projects. When you think of the Tab Elementary playground that needed to be redone, it paid for the football field at Bruton and a variety of other projects. These are the projects that remain. They're mostly football or basketball related as far as the venue. And you remember that the county wanted us to look at venues where we had some shared interest, and so that's what we're doing. And you'll see modernizing the weight room at Tab High and a variety of things at York High. And those are going out to bid now, and they should be finished by the start of next school year, so we're in good shape. And so I'll end the presentation with recommendations. The division finds itself in the same position as it has been in recent years. While we still have a greater amount of real estate development planned in the Upper County, we have lower student enrollment counts at Waller Mill and a plan to expand there that can help absorb the growth if it materializes. On the other hand, we have 6 schools in the Lower County enrolled above 95% of their brick and mortar instructional capacity, but only 1 if you factor in the portable classroom capacity at those schools. So we do have a little bit of time to work with. Therefore, we have a capacity issue at elementary in the Lower County, dependent on the timing of future development in the Lower County and dependent on actual enrollment yield in the Upper County. We continue to prioritize projects in the CIP that address adding capacity where we have the ability to do so, and then rezoning will have to be addressed as we complete these projects. Therefore, the staff recommends that we issue an RFP for rezoning in January, with the primary goal of making recommendations that prioritize additional enrollment at Seaford, which will of course relieve enrollment in the surrounding zones, and relieving the enrollment pressures at Magruder. And we want those recommendations by the end of calendar year 2023 so that we can bring those recommendations to you, board, early 24, and we can communicate those changes to families in the winter of 24 so that they'll know what the changes are going to be for the fall of 24. We'll also continue to eliminate all or more of the computer labs in all schools to gain instructional capacity, because if we can do so, we can put off some construction, and we will continue the placement of portable classrooms across the Lower County elementaries as needed. That concludes my report, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Questions?
No, I think it's important as we talk about this every year, this, 6-year plan as we move out, not to, immediately jump to any conclusions. I mean, a couple of years ago, we were talking about the Coventry numbers, and it was going up well past, instructional capacity. And now when we're looking at it, it's actually decreasing because of a couple different factors. So, taking all the information in and looking at it, and then with the Seaford, renovation and addition there, that's going to help alleviate a lot of surrounding schools with those numbers. So it'll be interesting looking at that, the RFP and the rezoning for that.
I just had a question about the portable classrooms. Do we plan on making those the single unit or the multi-classroom?
Well, it would depend on where you're putting them.
Okay.
And if you're looking at the Upper County, I don't off the top of my head remember Waller Mill. Now, there's no additional capacity at Magruder for portables, so unless we were going to put them on a field. And we don't want to do that. Right. So rezoning is where we're going to have to go there. Now, they still have 1 or 2 rooms that are available to them, and so they do have a little bit of room left, especially again through this first year, and then we'll start looking at how we can relieve the pressure on there. If we need to, because Magruder, although they've seen significant growth in the last 2 years, that number goes up and down there. So,
Depending on, yeah.
Just have to watch it. There's always variability. No further questions?
Just one quick question. The annex, what do we use that for? And I seem to remember that's like a shared facility with the county.
This is a shared facility. The county has removed some of the of what they're doing there. We have shifted our food service. That's where we have our offices for Sodexo, and they had 5 people that were crammed into a room smaller than this, doing probably about half of this, doing all their work. We have expanded them out where they have a little more room to operate. And there's some other things that we could be doing there, staff-wise, to accommodate some people. So that's, but I would say that's a low priority project for us. So that's one that tends to get moved around to make the numbers work.
Bumping it year to year. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you so much, Dr. Carroll.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll.
Next, we'll move into our gifted education update. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you. Christina Head, our Associate Director of Elementary Instruction and Academic Programs. She's now going to share an update on the gifted program and gifted services for the 2023-24 school year. Ms. Head.
Good evening. I'm excited to share some of the work we've been doing with our gifted program. It's 1 minute. Almost there. I think Dr. Carroll's left-handed.
I'm not.
Okay. So you may recall from previous presentations that we had a gifted committee, a year-long committee comprised of parents, GAC members, principals, and teachers, and they provided recommendations and feedback for us to consider as we move forward to enhance our gifted program. And so you see here some of the main recommendations of this committee. And so the committee recommended to increase gifted staffing to provide for gifted teachers in all of our elementary schools, as well as to expand our secondary services for middle school and high school. In addition, they encourage the division to develop a talent development program for our youngest elementary students. This type of program is to provide lessons to students to cultivate and nurture their thinking and problem-solving skills. In addition, we've heard from students and parents through surveys, as well as teachers, that they really encouraged to provide math gifted services. So this was also a consensus of the committee. And then the committee stressed that anything that we change or add to the gifted program, that we do not decrease the amount of time that they have with the gifted teacher in their services. And so the division was able to add a gifted teacher this school year, and we'll add another teacher next school year. And while we're unable to staff a gifted teacher in each of the elementary schools, we will be able to move the gifted program from Dare Elementary School to 5 locations in the buildings to have our gifted teachers in the buildings for next school year. And so we'll have 1 gifted teacher assigned to provide services to 2 elementary schools. And we're calling them the 2 schools partner schools for another term. And the 2 schools will be in close distance or proximity to each other. So for example, we've been doing this for several years now for Waller Mill and Magruder. So Waller Mill and Magruder are partner schools, and the students from Magruder come over to Waller Mill on a short bus ride, and the gifted teacher is there and provides the services for those students. And the feedback has been great from the parents and the teachers as well. And so the gifted teacher will have a classroom at one of the partner schools, and the students from the other partner school will ride just a real short route over on the bus for gifted services for each grade level. And so as we think about these partner schools for next school year, it has many benefits for our students. And so our students will receive the same amount of instructional time with their gifted teacher, if not more. And the students from the other partner school will just have a short ride over to that school. And this is important because right now we have some, our students leave the Gifted Center at 2 o'clock every day. And we have, for example, our Yorktown students, gifted students, they have to be on the bus as they go to Tab Elementary to drop those students off, then to Bethel Manor, and then they go all the way to their school, back to their school at Yorktown. That's a long time on the bus, and this partner school location model will alleviate that. And so also, parents and teachers often tell us that the classroom teacher, the student's classroom teacher, really doesn't know the gifted teacher or know what kind of instruction they're receiving as they go to Dare Elementary once a week. And so by having the gifted teacher in the building, it'll be an expert right there for the classroom teachers to learn strategies from this gifted teacher, and they can even stop by and actually hear and see the instruction in action, which they're not able to do currently. And so another benefit is that it will have a greater flexibility to do scheduling for special events for those two schools in regards to the gifted presentations or projects. Also things like field trips and school assemblies and even picture day won't be as difficult to schedule for those schools because it'll be just two schools working together with their program. And so now I'm going to explain some of the ways that we're going to plan for that transition for next year. So we're fortunate that we have a full year for this transition, and to prepare that, we are supporting our gifted teachers this school year. So when the students leave the Gifted Center at 2 o'clock each day, those teachers are thoroughly documenting their lessons and their curriculum because it will be used by all the 5 teachers next school year. And also we've got some dedicated days for those teachers to work on their curriculum this year, and also ESSER grant money to purchase or provide materials for all the 5 locations. And also we will provide them time next year to work on their curriculum, as well as come together weekly to collaborate and plan. This is important for instructional consistency for the 5 schools next year, 5 locations, but also we, just like we do our classroom teachers that meet together in PLCs and share ideas and collaborate, we want that for our gifted staff to do that, which they're currently in silos teaching their only grade right now. And so we will, at the start of the next school year, provide more details to our families, but we will also have an opportunity for them, the families and the students, to see their new partner school location, just as we did when Magruder and Waller Mill moved to that model in the previous years. And so going back to that first slide where I mentioned the recommendations of the Gifted Steering Committee, we are also doing some other things. For example, with the added gifted staff member this year, we are piloting the talent development program for first graders at the 4 Title I elementary schools. And then next year, we're moving to all 10 schools for the talent development program. And we are also going to explore different options to provide greater differentiation for math instruction in our elementary levels. We'll focus specifically on our 5th grade, providing them with enrichment opportunities that will actually prepare them, for those students, for that rigorous 6th grade advanced math. And also, Dr. Sherlock, our Associate Director of Secondary Services, he and I are going to work closely this year to really develop some options to expand our middle school and high school gifted services, such things as providing seminars or guest presentations, or even providing ways for those students in the secondary level to see other academic programs as well. Okay, so I recently shared all this information to our Gifted Advisory Committee, and they included this information in their meeting minutes, which they send out to all the gifted parents. And again, like I mentioned, at the start of the next school year, we'll be able to share this information with their parents and more details and some visits. So, thank you. I'll take any questions you may have about any of this information.
Mr. Higginbotham, did you want to start since you're our GAC committee representative?
Yeah, sure, I can. I think any time stuff is going to change, it can be scary, especially, there's a lot of families that have had multiple students, multiple children in the gifted programs. And so anytime you talk about these changes, it can be, create a little bit of anxiety. But we've got a year and a half now that we're talking about developing the program for the change and the transition. And then we can see the opportunities that are available. So while change can be different and scary, we can see the opportunities that the kids are going to get. And it seems like it streamlines the ability to provide the instruction to the students within the school. So that's what I'm excited to see about the additional opportunities these kids will have with their teachers, and the teachers with the gifted teachers with the teachers of the general ed classrooms too. So that's sort of what I'm looking forward to seeing that.
So I know we've been talking about this for a couple of years now and had the study done and had some recommendations, and I'm certainly on board with the new delivery model. I really appreciate that. I know that was a lot of time for some of those children to be transferred from one school to another, and they were losing instruction time because of that. So this helps with that, and I'm certainly pleased with that, and the expansion of the math. I'm certainly pleased with that. But my one question is too, in addition to that, does that expand more space at Dare Elementary School because we're moving that gifted education program to the different schools, the partner schools?
Absolutely.
So that'll give us several classrooms, a few extra classrooms there at Dare.
Is Dare, I shouldn't be asking the questions, but I should be answering them. Is Dare one of the partner schools?
Dare is one of the partner schools. They're one of the 5, which they will just need one classroom.
For that.
So the Extend Center currently uses 4 classrooms.
Okay.
4 classrooms, and there's an office there as well.
Oh, okay.
So yes, there'll be some space there at Dare.
Very good. Thank you.
And you were talking about a short bus ride. It's 7 minutes from Magruder to get
I love that.
Mr. Schaefer would know that.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that it's almost like we piloted it with the partner program, so really, I'm sure there were a lot of lessons learned with just the way things were handled, and I like when we do that. We do that at small, try it somewhere, see what happens, and then we can, expand it. So I think that's great that you've already kind of seen how that works with the partner schools.
Right, exactly.
And I was glad to hear about, obviously about Dr. Sherlock's involvement also, because I think there are we can leverage some other partnerships at New Horizons perhaps, but the CTE program, and from a career standpoint, you just mentioned seminars. Those are natural offshoots that perhaps we can leverage from a CTE standpoint with GIAC and resource those too. So
Right. At the last GIAC meeting, we actually did a little short presentation to the parents on the dual enrollment.
absolutely, great example. Maybe just receive funding, for that too, to continue that. So that's good.
One of the things that I will mention that one of the bullets was about the greater connection with the school community.
Yeah.
And because we'll have a gifted teacher who'll teach second, third,
Third through 5th grade.
4th and 5th grade, those students will have that consistency of the same teacher. The families will get to know that teacher, and the school community will get to know that teacher. So I think that's also a positive that will come out of this change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much, Ms. Head.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, great news.
Next, we'll move on to our budget update. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Ms. Geralds. So Dr. Carroll, Ms. Skinner, Mr. Bowen, and myself had the opportunity to attend the BASS conference last week. We received a lot of information there. One of the biggest topics is obviously funding and finances and the state of the economy. So Mr. Bowen is going to share some information this evening around the budget outlook. So I'll turn it over to him. Mr. Bowen.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor, Madam Chair, members of the board. So this evening I'll be sharing a budget outlook, and this will cover FY23 and FY24. The reason why we talk about both fiscal years is because when the governor releases his budget in December, it will include amendments for both the current year and for FY24. It just generally depends on the amount of funding that's available on how many amendments we'll see. But before I talk about the economy, let me talk real quickly about the budget process. So we've kicked off the process. Our school administrators will submit their inputs to the school board office on November 18th, with the school board administrators submitting their inputs by November 30th. We have 2 community budget forums that are scheduled: Tuesday, November 15th at Grafton Middle, and Thursday, November 17th at Magruder Elementary. The times for those forums will be 6:30 to 7:30. If you're not able to attend, you can always submit your recommendation or suggestion or input at Ask YCSD Let's Talk. That link is on our website, and it's also on the YCSD app. School board members, of course, we always meet with you. We haven't scheduled those meetings yet, but that will be coming in the next couple of weeks. We will continue to collaborate with local government as we work to identify what the funding level will be for next year. And the superintendent leadership team through the end of January will continue to review all of the requests that come in, and we'll be prioritizing those requests and balancing that against our available funding. The public forum, we have a public forum scheduled on January 23rd at the school board meeting. The superintendent will present his proposed budget on February 13th at the work session, and then we'll have a public hearing on the superintendent's proposed budget at the February 27th school board meeting. So as Dr. Shandor said, we attended the VAST conference, and one of my favorite presenters, just because he's such an expert in the field of finance, is Jim Regenbaugh with fiscal analytics. He's been presenting updates on the state economy ever since I've been in, and years before that. But he just provides just a comprehensive review of the economy, and how the economy goes is how the funding goes for education. So I'm always interested in his presentation, but what he shared with us was remarkable last week. The state of Virginia's economy is strong, some of the strongest it's been in my 35 years in state and local government. Just this year, September revenues are up 10.7% over last year. First quarter revenues, and this is July, August, and September, have exceeded projections by more than $500 million. So this is significant, and the state funding represents 52% of our funding. And a couple of other key indicators to note is that September unemployment in Virginia was at 2.6%. This was compared to 3.6% in September of last year. Payroll employment was up 3.4% higher than in September of 21. Virginia's rainy day fund reserves totaled $4.3 billion. That's incredible. And they made a point that if revenue collections over the remaining 3 quarters declined 16.4%, the state would still meet projections based on the current forecast.
Wow.
So this is significant. There's a lot of money that's sitting at the state level.
So even if they introduce additional tax relief, it would still have to be significant. I mean, we'd still, okay, that makes me feel a lot better, because I'm sure there's a desire politically for additional relief. We'll know in time, but.
So we could see some significant amendments in this session for the current year. I would expect that most of it will come next year.
Okay.
One of the things that we'll be looking at is trying to bump up that compensation, at least advocating for an increase in compensation. There's currently a 5% pay raise in state funding for next year, but 5% just doesn't seem to be enough at this time.
Hopefully that stays a priority. Yes.
On the local side, local economy is still relatively strong. The state of York County is strong. Not quite like the state, but certainly it's good. One potential impact that we're continuing to follow is the elimination of the sales tax on groceries. They eliminated it for state sales tax, but not local. Generally, when you see something big like this, it takes a couple of sessions of the General Assembly before it gets approved. But there's so much money out there. This might be something that could move forward. And if it does impact local funding, certainly it could have an impact on us as well. Some of the budget challenges we'll be facing in the upcoming budget, of course, is no secret staffing shortages. This is not a York County issue. This is a national issue. As Dr. Vladu has shared in previous presentations, York County has fared better than some of our school divisions in the region. But that continues to be an issue for us. Compensation, again, when we talk about compensation, we are the lowest starting salary in the region, and we need to make some headway there. While we may be the lowest, by the time you get to about step 10, we're no longer the lowest. We're in the middle of the pack, so we do make some headway, but we're not attracting the talent that we need to attract at that starting salary, so we have some work to do there. The health insurance fund, we've made significant impacts and headway with the health insurance fund. You know that we've been providing funding, moving funds to that to keep that solvent. But we've changed providers. We've increased premiums both for the employer and the employee. But what we're hearing with the inflation is that the healthcare industry is experiencing the same inflation, and we may be looking at increases up to 20 to 25%, much higher than what we're seeing in other areas. But certainly, this is a concern for us because compensation and benefits represents almost 85% of our budget. And so when we have to feed this fund, it comes at a cost. it comes at a cost usually to additional increases to compensation. So certainly we'll be looking at that very closely.
Was it that significant in 2008? Can you recall? I mean, 25% from a healthcare cost standpoint.
It was double digits, but it wasn't that.
Yeah, I'd not heard anything like that before.
Depending on the experience. Now, I was in a much smaller school division, so we were fully funded. And what that meant is you paid what the insurance provider recommended based on the cost and the experience. So we were seeing in upwards of 10 to 15% for a few years until the economy kind of leveled out.
Certainly depends on the model, but I hadn't seen numbers like that before. So
yes, and then often what happens is we still have a relatively I won't say rich, but we have a very, very good plan. Compared to our school divisions in the region, we have one of the best. So when this happens, you kind of have to look at some of the benefits that you're offering within the plan itself. As we know, we did add a $250 deductible to our plan. It's the first time we've had to do that. Most of the school divisions in our region, I think it's average of between $500 and $750. So we're still on the low side of even having made that change. Capital project funding, as Dr. Carroll shared, there are some issues with supply chain. Certainly, inflation has caught up to capital projects, and typically we'll find out how much the costs increase when we go out to bid. And so I expect that we'll probably have to shift some projects around as we take this next year's projects out to bid. And that will probably result in some projects getting pushed out just to maintain the highest priority. And then enrollment. Enrollment is one of the significant budget drivers for state funding, and we always like to present these numbers. So here's our snapshot of enrollment, and you can see in 2020 was our highest at 12,914. We lost 670 students due to COVID. Went down to 12,244. We increased it the next year by 365, and then for 23B, that was our budgeted number, 12,766. We're actually sitting right now actual at 12,800. So we are slightly above what we had projected for budget, and this is good for us.
always a good thing.
Always like to be above. So just next steps. Again, the governor's budgets will be released on December 15th. And then we have those scheduled, those annual scheduled meetings. The other thing is I point out is the last bullet there is January 11th, February 25th. That's the General Assembly session. This is a short session. Last year was the 2-year budget. They're just tweaking the FY23 and 24 budget. So we won't know if we'll have all the information that we need to incorporate that in the budget that you will approve in March. So if we don't have that information yet, then we will bring that back to the school board in May for your approval. And that concludes my presentation this evening. I'll be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Questions, comments?
You said what percentage of our operating budget was compensation?
Compensation and benefits, almost 85%. And that's not uncommon. Most school divisions are in the 80% to 85% range.
And then the state provides 52%?
52%, local government is 34%. Federal government's about 14%, and we've seen that increase as a result of the ESSER funding, and we've seen the local government percentage go down. And then the only thing that we control is about 1%. And that is for tuition that we charge for out-of-district students, summer school tuition, our leases with cell towers, and then the leasing of our facilities. We did eliminate school fees this year, so we lost about $75,000 there, but about 1% of our total budget is what the school board really controls.
Sorry, I had one more question. How's the Virginia lottery numbers as the years have gone? Those have increased the previous couple of years. Is it looking like that's going to continue?
Right now it does. Typically what happens, now I don't know what's going to happen for this year, but typically what happens is lottery revenues go up, general fund revenues go down. But because there's so much money on the general fund side, it's plausible that we might see more of that lottery money and not offset by a decrease in the general fund.
Okay.
I have to make a stop on the way home. Just remember to, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Bowen.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Moen.
All right, next we'll move into inclement weather discussion.
Yes, Dr. Carroll's going to share some information related to this topic. He has just a few slides. It's not a long presentation.
We'll have this conversation while it's 84 degrees out.
Yeah. I'm more worried about the leaves, right?
Yeah.
6 inches of leaves.
All right, Board. Thank you. So tonight, I want to talk to you about some plans and actions that we're taking to be ready in case of certain types of inclement weather. But first, I want to give you some context, because what we'll be talking about is our ability to switch to remote learning. So you remember, Board, when COVID-19 hit, we had to initiate a one-to-one computing environment. And we took a K-12 approach, of course, because we had to hit everybody. This was developed very quickly, and we used a mix of new purchases and repurposing existing devices. I mean, it would be fair to say we cobbled something together to get there. The total, and it's important to understand that the total units were less than the enrolled students that we had at the time. But that's okay. It got us through the COVID-19 remote learning, and we still are using it today. Now, this year, the program has morphed into a grades 3 through 12 proposition. As we looked at grades K through 2 especially, we wanted an almost full return for those youngest students to be working with teachers and parents, especially when we're talking about literacy. And we wanted to minimize screen time for those students. Now and in grade 2, we've placed 8 units in each classroom to help support small groups. We've also found that we've needed to use some of the existing units for daily support. Students forget their units, their devices. Then, of course, there's breakage, and they turn them in and get a different unit. So we always have to have kind of that buffer that's churning to make sure we get everybody a device so they can use it. We also are using those for online testing. Since we have the computer labs that are going away, we have to use that to back up for students who have their own devices and things like that. So the thing is kind of morphed, and we continue to function fine, though. We currently have a work group creating a sustainability plan for the second generation of one-to-one devices. And so that work is underway now. So it would be a common sense expectation from our community that we could quickly shift into remote learning in case of inclement weather or some other extraordinary circumstance. And we've indeed seen some Virginia divisions do so already. But as we learned during COVID, and you've seen a similar slide to this before, the state has certain expectations when you shift to remote learning, and they're not exactly easy to qualify. And so we have to make sure that we have all of these things in place. Power should be readily available in the area. We have to make sure that we are able to give our services for all of our special ed students, 504 students. We need to make sure that services like counseling and skill instruction to students as appropriate is available. We have to make sure that we have a certain level of meal service available to the students. And so when you think about that with, we've got 3 inches of snow on the ground, there is a reason why we're not having school, but we also have to satisfy all of these things. It can be difficult to do. So it's not, if we're going to do it legally, it's going to be difficult to do. And on top of that, we want to, these stringent requirements and significant, they give us some significant logistical hurdles. And the division would only resort to remote learning days if it was a last resort. Because remember, we want to maximize in-person learning, not just for our K-2 students, but for all of them. So a lot of conditions would have to be in place. And given the unlikelihood of meeting all those parameters in most weather closings, the division is going to keep this as a last resort, but we still have to prepare for it in case something like this were to happen. Now, kindergarten isn't a concern because their hours are much reduced. I think it's 540 hours, Candy, for kindergarten?
It's, for half day.
For half day,
Yes, I
right? So
believe
540 hours where everybody else has to have 990. So kindergarten probably would never be impacted here. They could just have the day off. But for our roughly 2,000 first and second graders, we need more information for our contingency planning. For example, if we have about 2,000 first and second graders. If we only need devices for 400, that's different contingency planning of where do we go get the devices and how do we distribute them and get them ready. So therefore, we wanted the board to be aware that we'll be sending out a survey only to our families with first and second graders tomorrow for the purpose of ascertaining what we would need to mobilize for these two grades. And those two questions will deal with the device access and the availability of adults to support students in this type of situation. So it'll be a quick 2-question survey only to our first and second graders. And that concludes my report, and I welcome any questions you may have.
I just know, Dr. Carroll, that last year this question came up from citizens or parents that I spoke to. You know what, we can do remote learning, right, if we close the school, but I explained to them that there were certain state requirements that were required and very difficult to meet those requirements, so not necessarily the case. But I don't think everybody has seen this presentation or heard that. So my question is this on the Ask YCSD as a question? Can we use remote learning pretty much any time? And somebody maybe explain this one PowerPoint you had to explain the parameters you have to meet to make it qualify for instruction time.
If it's not, it will be.
We will
Okay.
be.
Yeah, I think that would be good to have it on there, so then when somebody contacts me, I can say, you know, there is a list. If you just go right here, you can see it, and it makes it very difficult to meet the law that the state has set for this. So, yeah, it would be very helpful. That's all I have, but thank you. Thank you very much. I certainly understand the
Yeah.
stringent requirements.
I mean, if we're in a inclement weather situation, it's gonna be hard to meet those first four things where, you know, where power,
Might
you
have
know,
that.
power and is easily able to go out, and then food, being able to provide food for families in need.
Right.
So, and then we can't ignore the magic of a snow day every once in a while too. There's something to say about that. That might be my teacher background, but you know, there's something to go with it.
Yeah, but it gives Dr. Shandor and the division the flexibility they need because they may want to be focused on transition back into the classroom and the emphasis being there and not necessarily on trying to comply with all these, you know, contingencies.
Well, and speaking of the contingency about power, I mean, everybody has to have power, right? It's not like, oh, we have 95% of the county that does. Yeah.
There's a uniformity dynamic, yeah.
Mhm.
All right, thank you, Dr. Carroll.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have our proposed expedited updates to policy G. Shandor.
Thank you. Dr. Vladu, our Chief Human Resource Officer, has a very brief presentation related regarding policy G.
Madam Chair Gereltz, members of the school board, and Dr. Shandor, tonight I have several brief policy updates that will bring it to you for expedited changes, recommended changes. I'll begin with the top two rows. You see policy GB and GBA, JFHA. They guide the division process for equal opportunity, harassment, prohibition against harassment and retaliation. In those policies, well, you'll notice that there's a timeline, and that timeline is school days. We received several questions over the past several months about what does that mean, the summer school count. Generally, those school days are defined as school calendar days, and there's a reason for that. Often during the summer, you may have a student that you need to talk to or a family you need to talk to who may not be available. And so summer school is optional. We know many of our students participate in that program, but we may even not have our employees who we may need to interview and get more information. So to provide clarification, we're recommending that we define school days and specify that they're school calendar days. The next recommended change or update is staff leaves and absences. This is a very popular policy that gets used a lot. One of the things that is missing is the provision when there's inclement weather. You just heard Dr. Carroll talk about when anytime the division declares that the schools are closed and there's inclement weather, that some staff may have leave that's already in there. So when that happens, if the leave is in there and school gets closed, and then the folks who put in their leaves, the employees who put in their leave, well, again, that leave will be canceled. This is not something new. This has been on the books since 2010. It just gets all the information regarding leave in one spot. The last recommended change is the resignation of staff members in there. In the past, if somebody wanted to retire, they would provide 2-week notice. They put in their 30, 40, 50 years, and they put in the 2-week notice. They qualify for VRS, and then we would process that. You've heard many times about the staff shortages. And so if you think about 2 weeks to advertise, 2 weeks that somebody has to give their notice with the other employer, and then the process in the middle to hire somebody, you're looking at a minimum 30 days to fill that position, provided there's someone on the market to fill that position. And we recognize this is a life decision when folks are not just deciding to retire, but we have seen an increase in the number of mid-year resignation, not a lot, but some. And we want to make sure that we have enough time to provide coverage to our schools, and we believe this is a reasonable compromise to recommend 30 working days rather than the 2-week notice. So this concludes my very short presentation. At this time, I could take your questions and comments.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. 30 days is still not very many for
No, it's
retirement.
not.
So, I mean,
No,
I know industry, we're talking about 60, 90 days minimum. But if that's adequate, understand.
And when you're talking about provide at least 30-day workday notice, that means they can't put in their notice at the beginning of December and be out the 1st of January.
That's right.
Thank you, Dr. Vladu. We appreciate the information provided to us this evening. As always, the board recognizes the work involved in order to keep us updated. Our next regular meeting will be held at 7 p.m. on Monday, November 21st, here at York Hall. The work session is adjourned. We'll have a special meeting coming up.
Are we voting on this last policy, or is that just a reading?
Special meeting.
We have to, yeah, we have to have a special
Gotcha.
meeting out of the work session.